Welcome to Session 7 of Chapter 2 of Old Testament history. The flood was over, but the ark opened to a new world. The harsh sun beat down onto a changed earth and dried the land. Rainbows announced a new phase of the patriarchal administration. The 7 administrations form an introversion. It's like A, B, C, D, C, B, A, with the A's corresponding, the B's corresponding, the C's corresponding, and the D is in the middle. So that's where the focus should be, on the Christ administration. The A's are paradise with paradise. The C's contrast law and grace. And so seeing the symmetry, it assumes the same for the B's. True to form, there are 2 parts to each: a pre-flood period and a post-flood period on one side. And then similarly, there are 2 periods in the 6th administration: the age of the Antichrist and the age of Christ. Now, it's interesting. I saw a comment about the 6th administration and the harvests, and this might bless Diane. I don't know if she's seen this or not, but there are 3 harvests. There's first fruits, there's the main harvest, and then there's the gleanings, and that corresponds to the 3 resurrections. The gathering together is the first fruits. The main harvest is the resurrection of the just. And then the gleanings there are some good people that still get in the last great white throne judgment and the resurrection of the unjust. Most of that is going to be unjust, but there are few just people. So that's the gleanings. I thought that was pretty good. But there are going to be 2 periods in the 6th administration: the age of the Antichrist and the age of Christ. Now, the latter period is 1,000 years. Most commentators say that the first part of the 6th administration is 7 years. That comes from Robert Anderson's book, The Coming Prince. But I don't agree with that, because he fudged his math to try to prove Daniel's 70 weeks. And then, consequently, the 1 week that he says is in the 6th administration, he claims that span is only 7 years. And then he claims that the 70 weeks is weeks of years, but the years that he uses are never documented anywhere as prophetic years. The only 360-day years that exist in the Word is before the flood. But in order for Robert Anderson to fudge his math, and I say fudge it because he has the beginning point is the wrong date and the ending point is the wrong date, because he believes that Jesus was crucified on a Friday, and you can't get 3 days and 3 nights. Good Friday and Easter Sunday morning. No matter what kind of math you use, you can't get it. And so he's targeting a year in which the 14th of Nisan fell on a Friday. And we know that's not the right year. So his beginning year is wrong and his ending year is wrong. And so he used these quote-unquote prophetic years of 360-day years that's not used in the Word anywhere except before the flood. But, it's clear that the feasts of Israel were scheduled by lunar months and years, and they always fell on the 15th of the month, which was the full moon. So they used a lunar calendar, and there's just no way that they could square everything with Anderson's prophetic years. But the strident chorus of the followers of Anderson's eschatology chant over and louder that this part of the end times are 7 years. And, that's kind of difficult to stand up against that pressure, but I think it's impossible, because there's no way that the 7 church types in Revelation 2 and 3, if we're going according to the futuristic theory, could develop in that short of a period. Jesus said it would take a full generation, not just till the next generation is born, but a whole generation, till it dies off. He said, this generation shall not pass. So what's that, 70, 100 years? I don't know. But we know that Daniel's 70 weeks fit in a different way. We know that they're 70 literal weeks. And as striking and as innovative as Anderson's arithmetic may be, it does not fit the real facts. Now, I speak more about this in my One Hope of Original Christianity class. So let's go to Genesis and pick up where we left off. Genesis chapter 8, verse 13. Genesis chapter 8, verse 13. It came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the second month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, the earth was dried. And God spoke to Noah, saying, Go forth out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee, all of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creeps upon the earth, after their kinds, went forth out of the ark. So now they are going to repopulate the earth. And so the Lord said he wouldn't curse the ground anymore for man's sake, like Diane and I were talking earlier. And then verse 22, while the earth remaineth, seedtime and harvest, cold and heat, and summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. Well, I think this is the first use of summer and winter. Was this the first time humankind will experience that? Had the climate changed? Possibly. Maybe. I don't know. Genesis 9, verse 1. And God blessed Noah and his son, and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the air, upon all that moves upon the earth, and upon all the fish of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. So their diet changed. But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. So before the flood, they ate herbs. Now they can eat meat. Every moving thing that lives shall be meat for you. So had the Hebrew dietary laws been instituted? Well, I have written the reply in all caps is no. There was only one prohibition. Drain the blood out before you eat any animal. Genesis 9:5. And surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. And at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother, will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. And you, be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. So, capital punishment was instituted. So you had a dietary change and instituting capital punishment. Now, if a beast killed a man, hunt it down and kill it. Same if another man kills a man, hunt them down and kill them. Why? Well, if you live in any area where there are still a lot of wild animals that can kill human beings, you'll know. Why? Because if a lion or a bear learns that humans are easy prey, what are they going to do? They will add humans to their diet, because humans are easy prey for carnivores. And if they learn that, they won't stop until they are stopped. So, if that ever happens, all the men of the local village will get together and hunt down that animal and kill it, because it's learned to kill humans. Humans are easy prey. Well, murderers of people who murder other people, are no different. How often are murderers who have killed their wives, who think they got away with it, get caught years later when they try to do it again, or when they do it again, right? Most of us think that killing another human being is such a horrible thing that we would only do it in extreme circumstances, like in the armed forces or to protect our home and family. And our conscience would probably make us sick afterward. But there are monsters out there who think nothing of it. That is what capital punishment is for. And misinformed people, do-gooders, who don't know any better, who think the commandment is, thou shalt not kill, oppose capital punishment or fighting in the military, but they're wrong. The commandment actually is, thou shalt not murder. And you can look it up in the Hebrew Interlinear online on the internet that has the actual English translation in between the lines. Now, this does not make us James Bond licensed to kill. Later in the law of Moses, that all was legislated. Only the rulers had that right, and after a trial, to have an offender of a list of the most heinous crimes executed, or if you were protecting your home and family, or in war. So, back to Genesis, that's when these two laws were set. Do not eat blood, and do not murder. Verse 20, and Noah began to be an husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and was drunk, and was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brethren outside. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders, went backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. And all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Now, what did Ham do? Now, this is something I learned from John Shainheit, and the answer is in the REV commentary. And like I've said many times, I think the REV commentary is the best commentary available, the most accurate. Now, I'm not 100% going with it, because there are some things, but most of the time it is very good. And this is another one of those very good sections. I'll just read to you some from the REV commentary. The record in Genesis about Ham, his son Canaan, and Noah has been a problem for Bible scholars for generations. Ham did something to Noah that resulted in Ham's son, Canaan, being cursed. But what did he do? Genesis 9:22 says, Ham, quote, saw the nakedness of his father, unquote. What does that mean? When you study the record and pay attention to the facts and the idioms, you discover that when Noah was drunk and incapacitated, Ham had sex with Noah's wife. That's what that idiom means. And she got pregnant from that encounter and gave birth to Canaan, to whom Noah later gave a prophetic curse. One thing that jumps out of the Noah-Ham record is that although all of Noah's sons had children, Genesis 9 specifically points out 2 times that Ham is the father of Canaan. Genesis 9:18 to 9:22. The Bible states that 4 times. Also in Genesis 10:6 and 1 Chronicles 1:8. But why would that fact need to be so clearly stated when it's not stated that often for any other children of Shem, Ham, or Japheth? After all, Shem had 5 sons, Ham had 4, Japheth had 7 sons. So why say 4 times that Ham was the father of Canaan? And why would Noah single out Canaan and curse him? After all, Ham was the one who sinned. As we study the record, we see the Bible says 4 times Ham was the father of Canaan, because ordinarily, if Noah's wife gave birth, the logical assumption would be that Noah was the father. But in this case, Ham was the father. So the Bible clearly states that fact. So the idiom to see the nakedness of is, according to the Brown Driver Briggs English Lexicon, the word number 6172, Strong's number, means nakedness, but it's also as, quote, a euphemism for cohabitation, for sex, unquote. And Leviticus 18:6 is cited as an example. So if you study the idiom to uncover the nakedness or see the nakedness of someone, means to have sexual intercourse. And so that's what happened. Wow. And there's Leviticus 18 goes through this, Leviticus 20 if you want to read further on it, or you can look at the REV commentary. So why am I spending time belaboring this minor point? I'm going to go back to the REV. Ordinarily, Canaan would not suffer for the sin of his father Ham. If, however, Canaan was born as a result of the intercourse, then the enigma of the curse disappears. The curse of Noah is a prophecy of Canaan's future, not a personal vengeance, in the same way that the blessing on Shem and Japheth is a prophecy of their future and not a personal favoritism. Thus, Noah gave prophecies over his son, just like Isaac and Jacob. All right? And it's important to make one last point in this study. And that's why I'm belaboring this. It is still believed by some Christians, based on a teaching that's existed for generations, that the quote-unquote curse on Canaan caused the black races, and that black people are inferior to other races and are cursed. This is not true. It is not true. Ham had 4 sons. The sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. Canaan was the only son of Ham that Noah ever personally mentioned, and if the curse on Canaan was that he would be black and inferior, then only the Canaanites would have been black and not Ham's 3 other children. But Canaanites are not black. They are olive-skinned, as are other Mediterranean people. And the Canaanites did not move to Africa, but lived in what is now Israel. Ham's other 3 children, Cush, who founded Ethiopia, Mizraim, who founded Egypt, and Phut, who founded Libya, they moved into Africa soon after the flood. And it was in Africa that the black races developed, product of their genetics, in the same way that the American Indians eventually became more reddish, the Orientals more yellow, and the Europeans fair-skinned. But even in Africa, the descendants of Mizraim in Egypt were not black, but were olive-skinned, as they are to this day. So, there is absolutely no truth in believing that black people are black because they are cursed. If anything, the Canaanites were the ones who were cursed, and they were not black. So, that's what's in the REV commentary. I am against racism and discrimination in all forms. In Christianity, spiritually, there is no male nor female, Jew or Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, no bond nor free. But it also says, no barbarian nor Scythian. The Scythians were East Asian, Siberian descent, and so they probably had Asian skin coloring. Barbarians in the Greco-Roman world were non-Greek or Roman races, which includes people of various skin colors. But spiritually and in the church, we don't keep score about male or female, Jew or Gentile, circumcised or uncircumcised, bond or free, barbarian nor Scythian. So I think that puts a prohibition on all that kind of discrimination and bigotry. So now we get to the Table of Nations in Genesis 10. As man spread out around the world, then there were nations started by their progenitors, and that's what it's talking about here in Genesis 10. These are the generations of the son of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So it goes through all of them. The sons of Ham in verse 10, Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. And then, now it goes into a little bit of a paragraph here about Ham. Nimrod is of Ham's line, and his wife Semiramis, and they were the originators of Babylonian mystery religion. Nimrod was a type of the Antichrist, and it talks about him in Genesis 10, verse 8. And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter, and actually it's against the Lord. He was hunting souls and getting them into his organization. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod the mighty hunter against the Lord. That was his reputation. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Ashur, and built Nineveh, and the city of Rehoboth, and Calah. I have a note about that went forth, and that was the first war, led by Nimrod. Chapter 10, verse 12. And it goes through some more of the different progenitors, Nineveh and Lud and Calashim, wherever that is, out of whom came Philistine, the Philistines. Verse 20, the sons of Ham and their families. Then verse 21, Shem, and the father of the children of Eber. Now, the Christ line is going to go through Shem. So let's pick up verse 22. the children of Shem, Elam, and Ashur, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. The children of Aram, Uz, and Hol, and Gether, and Mash. And Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber, and unto Eber was born 2 sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. So, in his days was the earth divided. That's Peleg. Now, I do not believe that that means that the continents were broken up during the life of Peleg, because his lifetime corresponds with the same time as the Tower of Babel incident, when the earth was divided. So you get down to chapter 10, verse 31. These are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. And these are the family of the sons of Noah, after their generations, in their nations. And by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So now we get to the Tower of Babel. Genesis chapter 11, verse 1. And the whole earth was of one language and one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Come on now, let's make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, Come on now, let's build us a city and a tower, whose top, it says, may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Well, the reason they wanted to make a name was that God's people were making headway after the flood. Do you think people remembered why it occurred? All that sin and depravity. And so I don't think people were as inclined to do that as before. The champion for God was Shem. Shem means name. And he was a prophet promoting God's name. Hebrew tradition also says that Shem was an astronomer. Why? Because he was promoting the celestial gospel. So Nimrod and his buddies, who were working for the devil, wanted to set up a competing name for their side. Remember, a name is not merely one's appellation, one's label. It's a reputation. It's a renown. It's a legacy of what one stands for. So they wanted one of their own, a counterfeit one. So what does it say about the tower? It says, King James says, whose top, and then in italics, may reach unto heaven. Well, the King James boys missed it. It shows that by what they inserted in italics. It was not that the top reached up into heaven. It was that the top was like the heaven. What's that mean? It had a counterfeit Maseroth on it. This is the origin of astrology. The false prophecies that get people hooked to control them, and then along with it is a whole counterfeit theology to go with it, and it included, you guessed it, a triune God, which was Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. Tammuz was their son, who supposedly was a reincarnation of Nimrod after he died. So, counterfeiting like that is one of the adversary's ploys. When the word's moving, he can't stop it very easily, so he tries to dilute it by producing counterfeits. And this is what he did before. Remember, in Genesis 4, verse 26, It says, then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. Well, Bullinger says that what that really meant is that men began to call their gods Jehovah. So it was the same trick that the adversary did back in Genesis 4 that he does again in Genesis 11. So the Lord came down to see the city in Genesis 11:5, and the tower which the children of men had built. And the Lord said, behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Wow. Look at the power of unity, of like-mindedness. Well, the Lord couldn't have this happen, because if this unity got hijacked by the devil, it would be hard to stop. And guess what the devil's ultimate goal is? Get rid of the believers. Stamp out the Christ line so the Messiah can't come. So what's God do? He said, come on now, let's go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So somehow God did that. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build a city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Now, somehow, God pulled this off, and different languages and cultures ensued, and they have remained barriers to the unification of the world into one ever since. The devils tried and tried too. Great empires have arisen and expanded, but they couldn't keep going, and then they fell. Well, he won't succeed until 2 Thessalonians 2:7 declares that we, believers, who withhold, who restrain, will be taken out of the way. Look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 6. And now you know what withholds or restrains, that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now restrains will restrain until he be taken out of the way. And that last phrase, until he be taken out of the way, if you look at it in the interlinear, it says, until out of the midst he be, and there's no word there. And the interlinear supplies the word gone in brackets, meaning there's no Greek word. So until out of the midst he be, where'd he go? Where'd he go? That is a vivid picture of the gathering together. Wow. So when the gathering together occurs, we're all going to exit stage right. No, straight up. And all hell will literally break loose. There'll be nothing to stop the devil. And that's when the world will unify under one head, the Antichrist. Wow. So now we have the believers line in Genesis 11:10. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 35 years and begat Salah. And Arphaxad lived after he begat Salah 400 years and 3 years and begat sons and daughters. Salah lives 30 years and begat Eber. And Salah lived after he begat Eber 403 years and begat sons and daughters. Eber lived 430 years and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he begat Peleg 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu. And Peleg lived after he begat Reu 209 years. Their lifespans are starting to get smaller, and begat sons and daughters. And Reu lived 32 years, begat Serug. And Reu lived after he begat Serug 207 years, and begat sons and daughters. Serug lived 30 years, begat Nahor. And Serug lived after he begat Nahor 200 years, and begat sons and daughters. Nahor lived 29 years, and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years, and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years, and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. So now it's going to pick up about Abraham. So Genesis 11 and in verse 29, Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren, and she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So now we pick up the story with Abraham. Now verse 31 says that Terah, Abram's father, took them out of Ur. Well, you have to understand this according to ancient culture. Because first of all, to pack up and leave town like this was very unusual. Only government men, soldiers, merchants, and criminals traveled from the areas where they were born. Actually, Terah was not supposed to go. God told Abram to leave his kindred, right? But this is a vivid example of a Semitic idiom. See, Abram was the reason they went. God told him to go. But out of respect to the elder, it's said that Terah took him. You see that? That's just a Semitic way of saying things. What God told Abraham to do was very unusual, for he said, leave your kindred. Families were indispensable back then. They were the life engines needed for survival. Did Abram obey? Well, not quite. He still ended up taking Terah, his 200-year-old father, with him, and Lot, his nephew. Did God say to bring them? No. They got halfway to Canaan and had to stop in Haran. That's up at the top of the Fertile Crescent. For Terah, Abraham's elderly father, could go no further, and they stayed in Haran 5 years. Then when his father died, Abram continued his journey into Canaan. Now, Stephen clears this up in Acts chapter 7. Look at Acts chapter 7, verse 2. Acts chapter 7. And he said, men and brethren and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran. So, that's when he got the revelation. And said to him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I shall show you. Then he came out of the land of the Chaldeans, and dwelt in Haran, and from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him into this land, wherein you now dwell. See, that is why in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, it says the Lord had said to Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house into a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curses thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. There it is. The Christ line has been announced to all come through Abram. Shall all families of the earth be blessed in him. Wow. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. So that makes him 70 years old when he first got the promise back in Ur. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and look at this, and the souls they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. So, Abram didn't shuffle around when he was in Haran. He prospered. Abram was a prophet. He was a great believer, too, in prosperity. Now, God spoke to him in Ur, so he still had the Spirit on him in Haran, right? So who were the souls they had gotten in Haran? Well, Abram prospered, and he gained followers because he was a prophet. So he gained servants and followers. That's why I call him the Zig Ziglar of Mesopotamia. He had a strong suit in believing. He was entrepreneurial. But what he was about to do would require even greater feats of believing, for he was called to found a nation and progenate the Christ line and change the world forever. But his wife was barren. And there already was another problem. He was 5 years late. Genesis chapter 12, verse 10. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. You see, I think God had a plan. Palestine, Judea, was destined to be the crossroads of the world, because all the trade routes from Africa, Europe, and Asia went through there. And then with it being at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, it also would be full of seaports. So, and it was going to be up for grabs. How so? Well, God had foreknowledge that a grievous famine was coming. So you know what God's plan was? I believe it was to obtain this prized territory for believers. You know, location, location, location. That's what real estate's all about, right? And this was the most prime real estate in the world. So what was God's plan? To move Abram there, a prophet, great believer, 5 years before the famine, get him established, and then when the famine hit and the inhabitants died out or moved out, Abram would get the land by default. Now, had Abram obeyed and actually left all his kindred in Mesopotamia, he would not have had to stop in Haran, waiting for his father to die, and would have arrived in Canaan 5 years earlier. Then he would have gotten established in Canaan and probably acquired the same substance and souls in Canaan instead of Haran, and had been prepared to ride out the famine when it hit and gain the land of Canaan by default when the inhabitants died out or moved. So what actually was happening to that land is that it was vomiting out its inhabitants because they were so evil, just like what we talked about before the flood. Who lived there in Canaan? That's an easy one. The Canaanites. Remember, cursed be Canaan. So, when he arrived late, the famine had already hit. So he decided to move into Egypt. Now, did God tell him to go to Egypt? No. So how do you think Abram felt when he realized that he'd screwed up God's plan? Because when the famine hit, it had to become obvious. Oh, that's why he wanted me to come. So how do you think he felt? But did he condemn himself and give up on what God had promised? Well, no, the Christ light is going to be coming through him. He got back up off the ground, dusted himself off, and kept pushing towards that goal. But his decision to go to Egypt would have dire consequences. Look at Genesis chapter 12, verse 11. Genesis chapter 12, verse 11. Came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, he said to Sarai his wife, Behold, I know that you are fair woman to look on. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see me, that they shall say, Whoa, this is his wife, and they'll kill me, but they'll save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, that you are my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. You see, Abram's wife, Sarai, was very beautiful. Like I say, she'd won the Miss Door contest. She'd been on the cover of Shepherd's Illustrated. Abram feared that if Pharaoh's men saw her, that they would recommend her to the king, and they would steal her from him and kill him. If that happened, how could he receive God's promise? So he cooked up a plan. He said, Tell them you're my sister. Well, was that a lie? Was it? No. Sarai actually was Abram's half-sister. Look at Genesis 20. Genesis 20, verse 12. He's explaining this. And yet, indeed, she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. So she was his half-sister. That was not a prohibition until the law of Moses. Well, guess what? They took Sarai away from Abram. They took one look at her and they said, Wow, the king's really going to want her, a beautiful woman like her, and traveled. She would be an addition to Pharaoh's harem to educate all the other women. And also, she was beautiful. What were her beauty secrets? But was that in God's plan? No. Genesis 12:14. And it came to pass that when Abram was coming to Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and recommended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And he entreated Abram well for her sake, paid him dowry, and had sheep and ox and he-asses, and men servants and maid servants, and she-asses and camels, because she was worth a lot. So how do you think Abram felt now that his precious wife, one of the most beautiful women in the known world, was taken away from him? Well, could he achieve the promise of God without her? Alas, was all lost? Well, what would you do? Would you collapse in condemnation and give up? Oh no, I'll never receive the promise of God now. I disobeyed. Now this horrible consequence. Oh no, woe is me. It's all my fault. I'm to blame. Would you throw in the towel? Did Abram? No, somehow he believed and got her back. Could you do that? If you were condemning yourself all the time, could you muster the believing to do that? Well, somehow Abraham believed. Verse 17, and the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Pharaoh was running into a brick wall, just like Jesus later, when he appeared to Saul, he said, it's hard for you to kick against the pricks. Remember that? So somehow Pharaoh found out he was making a huge mistake. Verse 18, and Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you've done to me? Why did you tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? So I might have taken her to me to be wife. So she was still in the preparation stage. Now therefore, behold your wife, take her, get out of here. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him and his wife and all that he had. So now Abram's back on track, but wait, there still are consequences because Abram didn't literally believe when God told him to leave his kindred, because who's still with him? Lot. Look at Genesis 13. Genesis 13. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, all that he had, and Lot with him into the south, into the Negeb desert. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto a place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And it says the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together. So this is another consequence, for their substance was great, so they couldn't dwell together. So now he has to split the land with Lot. Had he not brought Lot along, this would not have happened. But wait, it gets worse. When he proposed the split, according to custom, he told Lot to choose first. So what Lot's supposed to do is according to custom and defer back to Abram because he was the elder. So Abram's supposed to go, Lot, why don't you go ahead and choose what you want and we'll split up here. And then Lot is supposed to say, no, Abram, you're the elder. You deserve to make the choice. I love you. Go ahead and make the choice. And then Abram, this is constraining according to custom. And then Abram says, no, Lot, I love you. Please, you make the choice. And then Lot is supposed to say a second time, no. Abram, you make the choice. I'll live with whatever you decide. And then Abram would make the choice. And see, that proved that Abram really loved Lot and wasn't a jerk. And it proves that Lot really respected Abram and wasn't a freeloader and would take whatever he gave. See, this is constraining. But that did not happen. What did happen? Well, when Abram told Lot to choose first, Lot said, Abram, you're such a great guy. Thanks a lot, man. I'll go ahead and choose. And so he broke custom, and he chose the best land, and Abram was stuck with the rest. That was a consequence of not obeying what God said. But God was still with Abram. And Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot was separated from him, lift up now your eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward, for all the land which you see, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land, in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. You see, I'm not denigrating Abram by bringing out the fact that he had not quite obeyed God, because Abram still pulled it off. No matter how many mistakes he made, no matter what the consequences are, he picked himself back up off the ground and believed God. And when God saw him do that, God showed him the promise even bigger. And that is why Abram is the father of all who believe. We're going to see more about that in the next session. I'll do that next week.